So, a couple days ago, I started playing around with learning a bit of Japanese, and as always happens when I approach a new project or area of learning, I was instantly intimidated, especially because it's Japanese, and instantly swamped from everywhere and from YouTube and the internet with advice of the best way or the only legitimate way to learn this language as fast as possible, right? And trying to work through all of that so that I can just enjoy whatever it is I'm doing has given me a really nice example both of sort of problematic ways of framing learning in general, and then also of the love of my life, this book, Technic and Magic. So good. How do you even describe? So it's describing two opposing reality systems, or essentially collective filters. Well, just filters that a person, or really in this case, a society or the world, could put, and our world gives itself to us really through those filters of what is and is not allowed to exist and in what ways. The underlying narratives or assumptions, you might say. And Federico Campagna gives such a clear, simple, central exposition of, I'm mostly just through the first half, so of the underlying system, you might say, or again, narrative or assumptions, that twists a lot of the world around us out of its own proper shape. And he calls that the bad one, technic, and he calls the opposing alternative, or one opposing alternative, magic. Anyway, so I feel like by default, when I sit down to start learning a language, or in this case, start learning Japanese, the system of technic takes over that action. So I'm instantly enrolled in this system, right, where what's put in front of me now as my goal and purpose is this complete, perfect, native fluency in the language. And I have to advance toward this goal as consistently and as quickly as possible. So one thing that Campagna says about technic system is that time in that world is understood as simply never fast enough, because the goal, a being in the world of technic, is not really a full, living autonomous being. All that we are is just a sort of item in a linear series of production, and or in a linear, or in a strictly defined absolute language. So any part of you that does not fit into those terms or into that productive ability is excommunicated, is denied, and in the end really doesn't exist or get to have a presence in the world of technic. So in this case of learning Japanese, I certainly have this background feeling that, okay, now I've started this thing, so any deviation from this efficient march toward perfectionist fluency, that's a failure. And now that threatens my status as a learner, or even as a smart or a diligent person, and it makes me an imposter in the world of language learning, and calls for judgment and some sort of consequence. So in this case, this series of production would be of just ingesting and reproducing the information of the language as as exactly and as like perfectly as possible. So that's the series of production. Now I'm just put in that, and my only purpose is to just produce. And so anything that is not useful to that series, including in the end like relaxation, enjoyment of the process that is not fed back in and is like, oh, if you enjoy it, you'll learn faster, so that's why you should enjoy it. Or like just natural human memory where we blur things out, things are sort of spotty and sporadic, different things are salient to us, we forget things. Any life outside of this process that again is not hijacked, like if you have other hobbies, you will learn faster, that is not hijacked to and fed back in to improve the process. So all of that outside of that series gets cut off, gets like denied presence and really denied existence in the world. Since I read this book, it has helped me so much in just like pinpointing what the problem is, or like what the heart of the matter of like the issue is with how I'm framing stuff, or how society is framing stuff, or it's so clear and so spot on for everything. Like it's at a good level of abstraction, I guess you would say, where this pattern that he lays out applies like everywhere. This video is very much half just read this book. But there are other ways to put what I'm sort of saying about learning, language learning Japanese. The way that at least I came up thinking of learning is that, so when I say, okay, I'm learning this, that instantly supposes like an authority who's the teacher, and then a subservient who's the learner. And the subservient's job is to just take everything given to them by the teacher and reproduce it. So their job is to produce or to perform, essentially. And when they do good, they get a reward from the teacher, and when they do bad, they get a punishment, maybe. And all of this is very like artificial. The rewards and punishments aren't really quite genuine communication. It's just like as an extrinsic motive to produce, because the assumption is, well, the learner doesn't really like want entirely to produce, or maybe in a sense they need to be forced into it. And like this whole system of learning is all artificial, and it requires this like artifice to keep it up and to keep it going. And again, technic is very much an artificial twisting and reduction of the world, and does require a lot of artifice to keep everything fitted into it. When I was, I'm talking very fast. When I was like 10 to maybe 13, I was really into this idea of unschooling, and now I'm back at it, I guess. Little me was very smart, in some ways. Anyway, unschooling, which is like taking all the artifice out of learning and just like letting kids do as they pleased. Actually dropped out of like school after 7th grade, and then I was homeschooled in various homeschool programs, but like dropped out of school because of that, because like my parents like let me. So that was cool. But yeah, unschooling criticizes a lot of the same things in the learning system, and how I would say it is that the unschooling like movement identifies this like technic sort of pattern within learning, and is like, oh, that's unhealthy. So again, another way to put it is that as soon as you say there's learning, okay, so there's suddenly like this authority and this teacher and this learner. Or sometimes, or well, with self-study especially, like in learning, I'm the authority, or like my rational mind is the authority, which takes in this technic system and is trying to apply it. Then what's the subservient or learner would be my body or my memory. And essentially, if that part of me is like quote unquote flawed according to that technic like perfectionist system, say that I forget something, basically, then I like will punish me. So it's an internalized like system of oppression, or just of like authority in the negative sense. And then the learning material is just sort of dead, inert material instead of being any kind of living whole or anything. The upshot of all of this is that in this world, in this frame of things, I can't just like do things. I can't just like live. I can't, for instance, just decide, okay, I feel like watching a video. Let's turn on like the Japanese subtitles. Okay, getting a little bit tired or bored of that. I'm gonna change it back to English. Or I say a simple phrase, and I'm like, okay, do I translate this, or try to translate it, or look up the translation, or not, or look up a word, or I can't just like forget one of the hiragana. So like every change or every decision, really every event, I have to be like asking questions of this whole frame that is really constricting my learning or just my experience or my life. And third way to express this is that technic imposes a sort of system of morality that follows the same patterns as any system of morality, and I'm thinking specifically of the twisted, like, traditional Christian view of morality, with, like, you do good, go to heaven, you do bad, you go to hell, forever, or are annihilated forever. So under this frame, whatever, like, production is what's right. Learning Japanese as quickly and fluently as possible is what's right. Non-production, forgetting something, doing something else instead, not really feeling like doing it today, is wrong. Choosing a method that is not the most efficient method is wrong. And then that produces either, the eternal torment, I guess, of feeling guilty, or just like annihilation. You're an imposter, you're not even legitimate anything. So with every event or decision or change, I'm having to ask, like, is this right? Is this okay? Is it right enough so that I can avoid the punishment, so that I can continue producing at a fast enough pace not to get noticed and thrown out by the system? So that is language learning, and really all of life under technic. And the alternate frame that Federico Campagna poses is magic. And real full life is a lot better described and experienced in those terms. You don't end up being as constricted. As CJVX says, the process of perfectionism really is not what produces perfection. Anyhow, technic starts with trying to fit everything into this absolute language and into this absolute efficient as possible system of production. And the magic system, or magic's world, rather, starts with the ineffable, that which cannot be known abstractly, or known like by the mind, by language. Yeah. And he says, like, the ineffable as life. So yeah, the sort of heart of everything, of every moment is ineffable, and we can never capture that. So if I frame my learning and my Japanese learning in this way, see, I'm even wincing. It's hard for me to say that because I'm like, I'm not really learning it. I'm not really seriously pursuing it. anyway, if I frame it within the world of magic, it's sort of what I was talking about in that video, Make the Best of It, where what is prioritized is just like beauty and enjoyment. So the focus is on like that ineffable and inexhaustible heart that is instantiated in every moment of my interaction with Japanese, whether that be forgetting a word, remembering a word, watching Spirited Away with subtitles on, which we did last night, etc. The most, how do you say it? Maybe the most important, the most real, or the most central aspect of that interaction is not any specific progress that I make toward any goal, but it's simply another manifestation and expression and instantiation of like the ineffable, of the heart, of like being itself and like life itself, of the heart also that is, I guess being, consciousness, and bliss, like enjoyment and love, and I'm having a good time doing this, and it's another form under which I enjoy life. The heart also, I guess if you could say, of like the logos of Japanese. So instead of it being a thing where Japanese is this inert material fed to me by some authority, or this inert material that I am feeding myself, it's reciprocal reconstruction, like John Vervaeke says. You could think of we are like two equal gestalts and equal beings, and interacting and having a communion and communication. And that's real learning. Switching over to the magic world doesn't take away any of the positive elements of learning, like that feeling of knowing more or making progress, etc. Real like full learning is that reciprocal reconstruction and like communion and literally becoming one in this free way and in this like personal and unique way, instead of only trying to conform to some kind of honestly inhuman and impossible standard. And it's not like lazy either, which I think is a lot of the fear, at least for me, in not listening to the like perfectionism or like shame kind of based approaches, is that I'll lose, diligence, or lose the ability to like make progress and learn things and do things and get better. But in practice, that's not true. I waste so much energy stressing out, essentially, and trying to figure out whether every little thing is right or right enough, which in the end is just not a useful question to be asking, mostly. Focusing instead on beauty and on what like feels right or is enjoyable really gives, you might say, like lines that are even sharper than the technic, rule-based, fear-based, like authority kind of lines. So yeah. I never have an ending. Oh, I'm supposed to read quotes for ending. I'll just find a good quote from here, because there's lots of them. Yeah, about technic. While something can be or not be just in itself, while I, just by myself and whatever I'm doing with Japanese, I'm doing that thing with Japanese, it just is. The fact of its being the case or not being the case relies entirely on an external sanction. If I am to count as a legitimate learner of Japanese in the world of technic, I have to conform to certain standards and get that constant sanction. I don't know if there's any here. Did I read the end? No, I don't want to read the end. Anyway, Japanese is pretty, and I want to interact with it and enjoy it without being intimidated. So to do this, I'm just, analyzing the structure of reality. Oh, side note, another contrast between technic and magic in the field of language learning is, so in technic, time is understood as like never fast enough, right? But also sort of spatially, it's like it's never enough, right? I guess no matter how many things I buy, I'll never have enough to be happy. No matter how many languages I learn or how good my accent is or how well I speak them, it's never good enough. It's never perfect. Because whereas magic operates under more of a like, it's always already enough. Because that sense of something being enough, of course, doesn't come from anything external that we can gain. It comes from within, it comes from like the ineffable. So I need to frame it like it's already enough that I'm me and I'm interested in these languages and I'm just expressing myself, in every new moment, a new way of learning. But I'm not chasing anything. Or I am chasing things, but the chasing is like contained within the whole, like it's already enough. The destination is implied within every moment of the journey, something like that.